The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter is a Japanese 10th century folk tale that tells the story of Princess Kaguya, who was found as a small baby inside a stalk of glowing bamboo. Princess Kaguya will grow into a beautiful and mysterious woman desired by many. So, after setting impossible tasks to all the suitors who wanted to marry her, the Emperor of Japan among them, she finally realizes that she doesn't really belong to this world. Princess Kaguya will take charge of her own fate and decides to go back home to the moon. Our fascination with the moon dates back to the most early and primitive civilizations. A key element of mythologies of many different cultures, our connection with the closest celestial neighbor has always been a mysterious and fascinating one. We have the cadence of the lunar cycles, its subtle and delicate light, and its changing appearance have hypnotized us for millennia. This relationship, though, changed forever about 5 decades ago when the first man set foot on the moon. An event that, by the way, was preceded by a great deal of, let's say, political uncertainty. We've all have heard stories about the Cold War and the golden era of space exploration. The Soviet Union and the United States battled for space supremacy. The Soviets first launched Sputnik. The Americans would eventually win the race to the moon with the Apollo program, and very slowly the fear of a nuclear war was kind of pushed away. It's very important to remember that the very same rockets that were initially designed to carry nuclear weapons were later on carrying cosmonauts and astronauts into space, marking a huge shift in national priorities. The piece of legacy from the Cold War that we preserve that is still applicable today, that is so important, is the Outer Space Treaty that was signed by the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and several other countries on January 1967. The Outer Space Treaty states very clearly, for example, that the moon and any other celestial body shall always be free of weapons of mass destruction, or that all astronauts shall be regarded as envoys of mankind. This is quite important because, unfortunately, as we all know, the history of human exploration is quite a dark one. It's synonymous of aggressive colonization and exploitation. So the Outer Space Treaty aims to protect space from ourselves. 2 years later, Buzz Aldrin salutes the first US flag on the moon. The idea of planting the American flag was conceived by the Committee on Symbolic Activities for the first lunar landing. Maybe you don't know that the first idea, though, was planting the United Nations flag. But finally, on that day, the United States was, even if only symbolically, taking possession of the moon. The flags, arguably the most important flags in American history, were manufactured in nylon by a small company in New Jersey for $5 a piece. Now, recent images from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter show very clearly that out of those 6 flags, all but one are still standing. For almost 50 years, these 5 flags have endured the full fury of the moon's environment. We're talking extreme temperatures and intense sunlight and radiation. So, what once was a symbol of American achievement, today, they're nothing more than just white flags. And think about it, it's as if almost the moon is enforcing the Outer Space Treaty, protecting itself from our political ideas. This is very important, especially today, when we've decided that the moon is, again, our next stop in space exploration. But this time, we won't be going there on a camping trip. This time, we're going there to stay. With the International Space Station being eventually decommissioned in 2024, and with Mars being a far too distant goal for human spaceflight yet, the Moon Village has been proposed by the European Space Agency as the next step in space exploration. So, what is the Moon Village? It will be a place for, let's say, scientific research. It will be a place for astronomy, for testing robotic technologies. But it will also be a place for private business ventures, such as mining or tourism. So how are we going to balance these completely different kinds of activities is not so clear yet. With my project, Peak of Eternal Light, I decided to explore a more anthropological approach when looking into the future human presence on the Moon. What will be the needs, the priorities, the motivations of this new space civilization? What sort of aesthetics or rituals or cultural artifacts will be created by it? What will art and architecture look like on the Moon? For example, where are we going to live? The Moon, unlike Earth, has no atmosphere and almost no magnetic field. That means that you need to protect yourself from intense radiation. Radiation coming from galactic cosmic rays or solar flares. You also need to protect yourself from micrometeorites and extreme high and low temperatures. We'll need to use in situ resources. These are materials that are easily available on the surface of the Moon, like moon dust that will be 3D printed, creating a thick layer that will protect us from all these hazards. You know, this is interesting because at least, I don't know you, but in my mind, I've always envisioned a lunar base as something big, bright, extraordinary. But actually, our homes on the Moon will be a lot like this. Lunar architecture will be very similar to Adobe architecture. And that is simply amazing because Adobe is among the most primitive building materials used in our planet. Adobe structures are affordable and extremely durable. Sometimes they even account for some of the oldest buildings in the world. Like this mosque in Ghana, a fine example of 14th century architecture that, I don't know you, but I think it would make a fantastic lunar base. So who knows, maybe all this time we've been preparing ourselves for living on another planet and we just didn't know yet. You know, maybe the Moon is a great chance to break free from the standardization of architectural models that we've been suffering for decades. But let's take a look at Etienne de Boulez's work for a minute. Here's a man who, in France, in the middle of the 18th century, was designing buildings that pretty much most of the times were too big, too massive, too ambitious to ever being built, but that nevertheless changed architecture forever. I would like to think that Etienne de Boulez would be very excited today to find out that with only 1/6 of Earth's gravity, what's impossible to build on this planet could someday be possible on the Moon. And that is true for architecture, but that could be true for all other aspects of culture too. The Moon could become some sort of tabula rasa, our perfect chance to redefine our future civilization. Another interesting building, this is El Caracol, a unique pre-Columbian structure located at the Mayan side of Chichen Itza that was used both as a temple and as an observatory. Because not so long ago, we had a special connection with the cosmos. We had a deeper relationship with nature. And somewhere along the way, we lost that connection. My role as an artist is to bring that connection back, to look at the future of space exploration with a more human, a more peaceful, and a more embracing perspective. That's why I proposed the idea of the Moon Temple, a temple to celebrate the Moon as a universal and mythical idea. A temple to promote a more sustainable, a more respectful, and an even more spiritual approach to the future colonization of the Moon. The temple stands on top, on the rim of the Shackleton Crater, a gigantic impact crater located right on the south pole of the Moon. With a diameter of 21 kilometers and more than 4,200 meters deep, this outstanding location has been proposed as a potential candidate for a future lunar settlement. So, why the Shackleton Crater? Because of its unique lighting conditions. As you can see in this illumination map, while some of its peaks receive almost continuous sunlight, its interior, one of the coldest and darkest places in the solar system, may have captured water ice, key for a self-sustainable settlement. The design and the visualization of the temple has been created in collaboration with TEDxU. This is a VR and spatial design studio funded by Spanish architect Javier Martinez Avila, and is inspired by the complex celestial mechanics that operate on the south pole of the moon. With a total length of 450 meters, the temple is connected to the Shackleton Crater through a ramp that serves as an entrance into perpetual darkness. In its interior, a lunar liquid mirror telescope gazes into the oldest and most distant objects of the universe. It will also have a forum that will serve for communal and cultural activities. To the left, the secondary oculus allows us to see planet Earth rising above the horizon for about 14 Earth days, while for the next 14 days, it completely disappears, encouraging a greater feeling of independence and self-sufficiency. After decades of complete isolation, the Moon Village inhabitants start developing a certain sense of common identity. For the first time, they feel free from all outside domination. And like it was once common in many traditional societies from planet Earth, they start creating very intricate objects with a very special agency, objects whose function transcends physical interaction. This stunning neckpiece, carefully crafted from moon dust and MLI aerospace materials, is believed to be one of these first objects. Due to its large size and weight, it was aimed to be worn only during very specific rituals. Even if its function remains unclear, we know that it was definitely made for spiritual and sacred needs. This object was passed on from generations to generations, and it was believed that it could help restore cosmic balance or help secure a safe passage to the afterlife. Unearthed from the interior of the Moon Temple, protected from direct sunlight and radiation, this vessel was found in almost perfect conditions. The object tells a story of the supernatural, a tale of immortality. We now know that after the struggling first generations of settlers, the lunar microgravity have the effect of extending life on human bodies, allowing the Moon Village inhabitants to live significantly longer than those on planet Earth. With an irregular shape and an exterior that resembles the lunar surface itself, this object was made to symbolically encapsulate the elixir of life in its precious interior. Here, several layers of MLI aerospace materials are being stretched over what appears to be an irregular surface or canvas. The result is a burstling, glowing effect, reminiscent of a powerful solar eruption. This phenomenon, usually accompanied by coronal mass ejections, results in spectacular auroras on planet Earth. On the Moon, though, these storms can be fatal. We can assume that this object was probably made by the Moon Village inhabitants as a visual reminder of these beautiful yet devastating solar events. So yeah, who knows what other objects and rituals we will manage to create up there. The Moon, unlike Earth, has no divisions, no boundaries, no nations. Words like race or religion mean nothing up there. The Moon is a powerful and pure symbol of unity for mankind. Are we really entitled to change that? The Moon might be our best shot to finally work together towards a common goal in a peaceful and sustainable way, free from political boundaries and ideological differences. Living on the Moon, yeah, it might be an interplanetary utopia, but I'm convinced that in this utopian exercise, we can break free from many of our limitations here on planet Earth. And I'm convinced that art, as a universal language, is the tool, the force that can bring us together. Thank you.